Hello everybody and welcome to episode number 5 of the Veilcast. Today we have some awesome stuff to show you. We have the alpha video that's playing right now, just that away. We've got 3 minutes of actual in-game footage that we can talk about, we can dissect, we can look at all the awesome stuff and everything. On top of that, we're also going to talk about the BSC video, all their crazy ideas. We're going to talk about that as well. Joining me as always, Velik, how you doing today, man?
Doing good, man.
Good, from Hogwarts, the school of witchcraft and wizardry, right?
Witchcraft and wizardry,
right?
Yeah, I decided to go a different angle of nerd today.
Different angle of nerd, awesome. And Alistair, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'd put a Star Wars shirt if I had one.
Right, that's what I'm doing.
This week was the Star Wars Nerd Week, guys. New trailer. Oh my god, I had to watch it like 5 times to write.
5? You're casual. I watched it. I've literally seen it like I think 13 times.
I got stunned by the Star Destroyer on the sand,
right?
And I couldn't see anything else.
The whole thing's
doing good.
The whole thing is good.
Oh yeah. I was in the bathroom at one point. My wife came and knocked on the door. She's like, "Are you watching the trailer in the bathroom?"
All right, that's a little weird. I didn't go that far, but
yeah,
I didn't know how much of a Star Wars nerd I was until that came out. I'm super excited, but we can't talk about that because we'll get off topic. We'll talk about that the entire time. We are talking about Camelot Unchained. This is the first look pretty much everybody has gotten of the actual game, unless you have been in the alpha tests. This is everybody's first look. Let's go first over. What do you guys think? What's your first impressions seeing this video? If you've never seen it before, what were your first impressions?
Lots of fireworks.
Yeah, lots of fireworks. I like how the light works, to be honest. You know, that's the first thing that called my attention to the image of this game in general is like the lighting when it's night, when it's day, you know, the differences, and you can see the spells flying around, and you can see, like, if somebody makes a fire spell from far away, you can really see that somebody's casting a spell, you know, and you see the projectiles just flying around. I like that. That's what, you know, and you can see that the shade from the mountains move as you know, as the sun goes up and down. Obviously, I think it's because it's alpha. It's going faster than intended, right? I think the day and night will probably have a longer duration when the game comes out. But it's still really awesome to see how that all is working.
Yeah, you can definitely see the spells from really kind of far away, which is nice, especially at night. I noticed it's kind of more of a murky darkness, which is still kind of cool, even though you can still see pretty far, at least in the alpha anyway. But the spells are just, you know, all the way clear across whatever your field of vision is. Just that guy's casting a spell, that guy's casting a spell, which is, I think, really good. And it's what they said they were going to do. So
yeah, it is. It's super far. I mean, I think that was the first thing looking at this coming from ESO, right? ESO is really close. Your camera's close. Abilities don't go very far. You can't have too many people on. I mean, you can have a lot of people on screen, but it lags you out. And so looking at this is actual in-game footage. They just hit record. They're pegged at 60 FPS the entire time. And it never goes above that. So I know sometimes games have like a limit. Like maybe they could be above that if it let them, if the engine. And look at how many people are on screen. There's so many. There's at least 100 people. I'm being conservative, at least, because I hate to blow it out of the water, but at least over 100 people with spells that go farther than any game I've ever seen, and they're pegged at 60 FPS with no visible light.
I mean, we have to consider though that, you know, these are all character models. They're all the same. You know, the server doesn't have to load each person's armor and guild and everything.
That's true.
So there's, you know, once they have gear and unique looks, then that increases the FPS. You know, the more unique the characters are, the harder it is for the server to process all that information because it has to, you know, basically read and display to everybody else, you know, what gear you're wearing, how tall your character is, you know, what kind of face he has and everything. So all of that makes a difference since now all they have is kind of standard models. So it's like 9 different models that the server has to worry about.
Yeah, but they're almost 2 years from release. Come on, Alistair, get on the hype train, right?
Yeah, I'm just being realistic here. You know, I don't want to be a fanboy.
Don't be a fanboy. Notice really is that while all the models are of course kind of copied, you know, they're all copies of each other. They're all the same. I did notice that while some things are shady, the models do actually look really pretty good right now on the stage they're in. So they may not have to load armor and everything, but they're at least starting. It looks like they're starting to really work on loading in some of those better assets.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that the way it looks. I agree with you. Looking at some of these up-close shots, some of these characters look really cool, and they don't even have armor yet. Weapons, cool-looking stuff. It looks like there's 3 per side. There's, the red Arthurian, the green, which is the TDD. I'm not even going to try to say their name. And the Vikings, which are blue. Each one has, 3 different races. And like you said, the races look really good. What do you guys think about the graphics overall? Right, because it's kind of got a different look. It's not $100 million AAA MMO. Do you guys any thoughts on the game world, how it looks?
I mean, I feel the immersion already, man. To be honest, and I hate to use that word because I remember when they were discussing pre-launch ESO, everybody was like, "Oh, this breaks my immersion. That breaks my immersion." And breaking your immersion was like the excuse for everything, right? Oh, I don't want this because it breaks my immersion. So that's not on the sense that I'm using the word. I'm using the word in the sense of, I feel like it's a live word. It doesn't have much yet. There are not many castles and anything, but just the lighting and the landscape and the way they're built, it already feels like I'm in a place. And just the fact that I don't see stuff loading on the horizon because the horizon is so far.
Right?
It makes me feel like I'm in a real place. It makes me feel like, okay, oh, look over there. There's a fight. I go up in a hill, and there's an advantage to doing that. I go up in a hill so I can look across the landscape, and I see, clusters of people. There's a fight over there. Oh, look, there's a guy casting a spell over there. So the way it looks, even though the graphics are very simple so far, there's no grass or bushes on the floor or anything. It's just all plain. There's just some trees. You can feel that it's a live word, and you can see the potential already. Just because those things, they matter. They matter more than people give them credit for, especially the daylight cycle. It helps a lot with feeling like you're in a real place and really, getting yourself involved in the fight. So I like that. There's a lot to improve, but I already love the direction that it's going.
Yeah, a lot of the elements some of the elements are simplistic. Some of them are better developed, and I've noticed that a lot of the abilities, either there aren't that many abilities yet in alpha, or they seem to reuse some of the graphics across multiple abilities. Obviously, I don't know which it is. Just looking at the video, because I see a lot of the same effects go off, but most of the effects I see in there look really good. Like there's one point where he summons a rock wall out of the ground. It's kind of like a portable cover type thing, and the texture and everything on the wall looked really good. I liked how it came out of the ground and everything. It looked natural. It looked really nice.
Yeah, definitely. And like you guys are talking about, this is still early. There's, the animations certainly aren't done. I mean, they're using a lot of repeat animations. Right here's you're talking about. I'll pause the video. These are walls that they just created those walls. And there's actual in-game physics. So people can run into the wall, enemies can't come through it. Spells and arrows that they're firing at you are going to hit those walls. I look at this at so much potential, right? Really, this obviously isn't an end game, right? They're not trying to say this is the way it's going to be. This is really just this is the potential of what you could possibly see in the game. And the potential is sky high, right? You can look at how many people are on screen, how far spells fly, the way you can make walls and stuff. I mean, look at they're fighting over this keep here. There's a crack in the wall. I mean, you can actually stand in the crack of the wall as a tank, and you can make a tank wall, right? A lot of games can't do that. You just run through each other, right?
Yes, there's collision, and that makes a lot of difference. Collision detection makes the combat being much more tactical. Positioning is so much more important. I don't know if they have friendly collision, but I think they do, right? I think you can also bump into friends.
Yeah, I think so. I think they've talked about when you're in combat, you're fighting people, you're going to run into even your allies. I think when you're out of combat, you have a way of going by them, so there's not any sort of griefing and
trolling.
Stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah, standing on the front of the of the way out to the city.
Right.
But yeah, so if you have collision, then really, if you have people who don't, it's better to have 10 people who know what they're doing than to have 15 and those 5 don't know what they're doing, right? Because the 5 people are going to mess up the positioning for the other 10, right? They are going to stand on the way and they're like, come on, you got to move, and everybody is like, oh, I don't know where to go. So really, discourages Zerg strategies. You know, it
So
discourages.
you mean, as Hoodster just pointed out in chat, you mean you're actually going to miss being able to stack all on top of each other, one giant
Right.
ball?
Yeah. And this too, on screen here, they talked about in their video how there's physics-based. So we're talking about the physics, but it's also server-side physics. If you haven't seen the video, they talk about how this helps prevent cheating, where you can like hack your client and stuff like that, where it lets you go through walls, but the server knows you're not supposed to do that, and so everyone else will still see you outside of that area. Same thing with combat. You're fighting, you're not going to have 20 people all attack one person at once in melee range. You can't get to them. It's not going to let you do that. So, I mean, this really gives... Let me back it up here just a little bit. We'll talk about what we can see as far as strategy. We're all in Legend Gaming, Art of Veritas. I think there's going to be a lot of guilds and groups of friends out there who are excited for the opportunity, not to just Zerg and the most people win, but strategy. Looking at like this shot right here, there's a wall, there's a crack, you got people fighting on each side. You know, these people are trying to get in, these people are trying... I'm super excited for how many options there are, right? It's actually going to matter. It's going to...
It's huge. I mean, either that hole... I don't know if the hole in the wall was there already, or if they blasted a hole through the wall, but then immediately, you know, the defending spellcasters came in, cast spell walls in the gap to just basically be like, no.
You're not denied, right? So there's a reason to make a wider gap. There's a reason for you to make multiple entries to, you know, attack a keep from multiple fronts, you know, because you throw your opponent off of their balance. Like, okay, we can't just stand on this gap here and attack them. They're attacking over there too, and they're just going to come behind us. So, you know, there is all these elements that are real siege strategies from medieval history, you know, because of having this realistic physics adds this element of having more realistic strategies. You know, you can't just, we blew a little hole and that's enough, because we can just go through that hole. And it doesn't matter that there are enemies standing there. If they don't do damage enough to kill us, we can pass an entire Zerg through the hole, right? But in this game, that's not how it works, you know. So you're going to have to break the enemy keep enough for a big team to enter there, and depending on how much defense they have, and etc. So,
speaking of physics in this particular shot, what I want to know is, can I blow a big enough hole in that wall? And if I do, will that annoying Lucherpon fall to his death? That's what I want. Right. I mean, there's so many options, and two, like the strategy. I mean, I think this is so much fun because we've had these games where it's pointless, right? Like going back, World of Warcraft, right? You just go to point, go to point, go to point. There's some strategy, what abilities you use, but it's not like this. Like, what if as a defender, you let them make a little hole in the wall? And as they're coming through, you have casters on top who put walls down, the castable walls, and now you've blocked them off. So you let 10 people through, you kill them really easy, and the rest are out there. You just filter them through one at a time. This is where you have in other games where a Zerg of 100 people, they normally win. But here, with some good organization, you can absolutely just decimate.
Yeah, I mean, have you watched Vikings, the latest 2 episodes, you know, where they kind of break into the gates of Paris, and then there's this tunnel, you know? So casters can make a tunnel like that, you know, and then it's open at the end, but then as people go in, they just close it, and then they close the other side, you know, with a castable wall, and then you just explode everybody who's in there, you know. Yeah, so this kind of stuff, cutting off a group of people, is doable because of collision and the way physics works.
Yeah, similar concept. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily want to blast a hole and just rush through because of exactly something like that, or the enemy could do something as simple as just having all their casters sit behind the wall. When the wall comes down, they just come zerging in, they all go AoE.
Right, blast them. So then you have, I mean, you can also, they've talked about not just destroying the buildings, but you can actually take their resources. So you can like have your crafters go out there with you. You can break down the walls and take those resources back with you. So that's another strategy thing. Do you blow 1,000 holes in the wall to get in there and take it, but then you don't have any of these resources to take back, you know? I want to ask you guys, do you normally play melee or caster? What do you normally play? Both of you.
I always end up wanting to play caster, and I inevitably end up making a tank.
I have no rule. I play whatever. It depends on the game. I started as a caster with a warlock in WoW, and then I moved on to healing. Still caster, but different kind of caster. And then I moved into Star Wars. I played a tank, And then ESO, I played a Dragon Knight, which is kind of a melee tank too.
Yeah.
And
I ask because I always play melee. I don't know why I don't like being I run in there. If I make a caster, I'm going to run in there with my face and die. So I always make a melee. And two things I noticed about this video. One we've talked about is the physics. I can actually be a tank in PvP now. I don't have these useless taunt skills that don't do anything. I can actually, stand in front of you and you can't get to my healer because I'm in your way. And on top of that, and this is what worries me, what do you guys think about the casting range that we're seeing in this video?
Some of it's really long.
It's half a mile or something. How far is this? How's that going to work? Is everybody just going to be a caster? Because the way it usually works is you have a whole row of ranged people, and then one little melee person's like, oh, I'm going to win the battle. Then, boom, they just blow them up, right?
Yeah, I assume, again, this is pure assumption, but I assume, since we have that ability customization system, you can build an ability, then you add something to it, you go, I want a fireball, and then you go, okay, I want a fireball that goes really freaking far. Well, it's not going to do as much damage as another fireball. So, and I'm assuming it's probably going to have a long casting time. So they can have those spells that are going to shoot really far, but again, it's my assumption. It's going to have a really long casting time. It's probably not going to do as much damage as a closer range spell.
Yeah, and not to mention that it's going to be hard to hit, right? I mean, you see the fireball coming, right? So, maybe the first one hits because the people are not expecting it. And then they're like, okay, look, there's a guy up there on the mountain. He's shooting fireballs. So all you got to do is, move a little bit to the side, and it's not going to hit you, right? So all of this is, or you just make a wall over here, and then if he tries to shoot again, it's going to hit the wall. So shooting stuff from afar, yeah, maybe a surprise attack, with a bunch of casters doing it at the same time, it might be a good opening move, or something that will get you an edge during a long fight where, it's kind of even, break a wall of tanks just by exploding them suddenly with a big hit that nobody saw coming. This kind of stuff I can see happening. But I don't think people are going to just sit far away, being impossible to be hit and to just shoot fireballs, because they won't accomplish much with that,
Sure.
Especially because, I mean, you can't break a castle's wall with fireball. So sure, you can kill some people, but if there is a gap there and so far, they can just rebuild the wall, and then now there's nothing you can do anymore. You have to put siege and break the gap again,
Well, let's take a look. Go ahead, Val.
I was just going to say, at one point, I wasn't sure exactly what this was, but I did see one spell that almost looked like a cloud of fog or mist or something that was stationary on the ground. So that kind of made me wonder if you might have some sort of concealment abilities that you could actually use for other people's benefit as well.
Well, talking about abilities, let's jump into the BSC presentation. This is where they talk about combat, they talk about making abilities and that sort of stuff. Let's see what Mark and Ben have to say about that.
Our game.
Okay. Well, the basics of the ability system is that you have a series of component parts. So when you assemble component parts together, you get an ability. You can take that ability and activate it, and it will do something. The core parts are the primary component, which is what you're using. You might have, a sword, or your fist, or your tail, or your magic rune, or whatever it is. You have a thing that you're going to use. The secondary component is going to be how you use that. So if you have a sword, that might be a sword and then a slash as your secondary component, or a thrust, or some other action using that sword. Obviously, not every secondary component goes with every primary component. These components are all going to be class limited and unlock driven, so that you're getting different ones based on your, proficiency with one component to earn the next one, or your stats where you might not be strong enough to use a heavier sword that might have different actions that you can take with it, so different secondary components once you get a new primary component. And then on top of that, there's a layer of modifier components, which is the most diverse and large group of component parts in the system. So you can take a modifier and say, I'm going to swing my sword fast, or I'm going to swing my sword really hard, or I'm going to swing my sword in a different way to target some different part of the person's body to make a different type of wound to them.
So just to be clear, what Ben has just laid out, especially talking about the targeting of specific locations, really is a system where, once again, like the magic system, you have control not only of what you're going to be doing. So in the case of, as Ben says, a fast swing or a hard swing, but also the equivalent, again, of adding this other element, which allows you to target the head. It allows you to target the arms. It allows you to target, the legs. And that is very unique and different, isn't it?
Yeah, the body part targeting was something we've had, multiple conversations on as we've tried to work this out. And it's still in a state where we really need to get into the game and prototype it. That's going to be one of the, hopefully very soon, steps in developing our combat system as we get the ability system further along. But having a character that's not just a bag of hit points or just a single health bar, as you would typically expect, because almost every game works that way, where you have, your head is different than your body is different than your legs. You can hit some of these legs with a hammer all you want. They're not going to die. They're not going to be able to walk very well, but they're not going to die, right? Because that's not a vital body part. But if you stab them and they bleed, they might bleed to death. So being able to have abilities that work with that system and being able to have healers that work with that system makes healing more interesting, makes damage more interesting, makes abilities more interesting. And it's the type of thing that, as we were talking about, adds depth and interestingness to a system where it's not just everything is happening really fast and that's what's driving the, things that you have to pay attention to and the excitement and the action in the game. There's a lot more that is going on, and that's why it can be spaced out over a longer period of time and not feel boring and slow.
All right, so lots of information on there, and we're talking about the ability system. In the alpha video, they give us a sneak peek, if you will. That's what we got up on the screen here. Let's go through, because there's a bunch of stuff they talk about, how to build abilities, body part targeting, the pace of combat. Velik, what do you think about the ability to build abilities? The ability to build abilities.
I think it's really cool. I think it adds a very nice tactical element to your character customization that I really like. I mean, the idea of sitting there building abilities, honestly, I would sit there for ages once I had enough abilities, and I just keep swapping things in and out to create different things I like. I am a little bit worried about it on the same hand because I'm not very good at remembering like 500 different abilities, and this allows you to make very specialized abilities. Like, I may have one that I think they actually use this as an example. You might have an ability you design specifically to do a lot of damage to a gargoyle.
Right.
So you might use that against a gargoyle, and then I'm like, okay, so I have one against them, and one against that, and one against this class, and then I'm like, okay, I have 500 abilities now. How do I remember all these?
How many action bars are we going to have?
Right. Yeah, I agree. I like the customization of it is really awesome, but I don't want 500 abilities either. I think, what if maybe like, because these are all components that go together, you put them together, and what if that ability used for our gargoyle prevents you from having another ability, so you don't have like 10 different race-specific abilities, you get to pick one, and it's for gargoyles, or you know what I mean? Because then it gives you the option. You can always switch it out, but like if I hate those gargoyles, you could use that ability.
I think they talk about primary and secondary, the primary component of the ability, and then the secondary one, which is like the modifier, right? So maybe the gargoyle, high damage to gargoyles is a primary component. So it requires you to have a sword made of silver, right? So the primary component is silver sword. So that does more damage to gargoyles because it's a silver sword, whatever. I'm just using silver as a lame example here. So, and then you add modifiers to that. But basically, any abilities that you create using the silver sword as a primary component is going to give you, so maybe they could, you could program the interface that every time you equip a silver sword, the abilities swap, and then swap to the gargoyle ones, so like, a lot of gargoyles, equip the silver sword, swap, and then it's all automatic. And then if you're not fighting gargoyles, you can use your other sword that does more damage to everybody else, and then you just swap and the bar swaps together. They said that the interface is going to be very, very programmable by the user, so I see no reason why we couldn't do something like that. I mean, as long as they're intelligent about it, I don't see the problem. The problem is if they're really, they design kind of dumb systems that don't allow people to do that kind of stuff where you have to manually drag the ability in and then manually drag it out. That would be terrible.
Yeah, I mean, if they did something dumb, we wouldn't be saved from whatever system they did, right? But the coolest thing is there's so many options, right? I mean,
it's true. And there was a good point the chat brought up. Actually, like 2 or 3 people said that I hadn't thought to apply to this, that obviously the abilities level with use. So in that way, you probably will have to manually, they won't even necessarily have to limit our abilities because we will probably have to pare them down ourselves, because otherwise they'll all be, we'll be like a hybrid build. You'll have 500 abilities, but they're all kind of suck.
Yeah.
Low
That makes
level.
sense. So here on the screenshot, it shows you, and they show this in the video. This is the beginning of this alpha video. You can check out on their YouTube page and stuff. But starting here at the bottom, you get to pick your primary ability. So like you're talking about maybe the sword or maybe whatever it is, the thing you want to use. And then the secondary was how it modifies it. So maybe it's, fire ability and it's a ball, so it's a fireball, or a sword and then a cleave or whatever. So but there's all these other things that branch out as well. They didn't even show in the video. I don't even know if they have it set up yet. But I mean, I can't imagine how many options there are. Then you get to pick the icon, and then you get to name your ability. And I mean, you could, like you said, Vel, you could spend hours and hours just on one. I hope they have test dummies or something, because I mean,
Oh yeah,
It's basically
they're
a sophisticated macro maker that gives you better options.
Yeah.
Are there any other games that have this system? I haven't played any that do it like this. Are there any out there? We got chat here working for us.
I mean, the most complex kind of stuff we have in that sense is ESO with the morph, but it's only, you have one ability and you can morph it onto different ones, which is not exactly the system. You're not creating the ability. And the second one where abilities switch like that is Aeon. Aeon has a combo system, right? So you hit the guy with an ability, and then it switches to another, and then it opens up like two more, so you can choose which one you want to go for the combo. So you can finish the combo with a stun, or finish the combo with a big hit. But that's combo. That's chain of attacks.
Yeah, those are just whole abilities.
Yeah, creating they're separate whole abilities. Creating abilities like this, I have never seen an MMO do it, because it's kind of hard to balance, but at the same time, it isn't, because I was reading an article once that talked about creating this chaotic, organized environment, right? Where you have so much chaos and so many possibilities that nobody can predict. There's not a best one for everything. So basically, the system balances itself out because people create the counters. So, so you come with this build is OP on melee. Okay, I'll make a build that you can get on melee. So now your build doesn't do anything, Now you gotta switch. You can't go with such a crazy build with so many melee abilities. You have to pick up some ranged, because if there's one guy on the other team that has a bunch of snares and roots, you're not gonna move. So, and then you can't do anything. So the players will have to kind of, outsmart each other. And that's where the fun is, because then, it's less work for the developers, and it makes for a more balanced game where you have a choice. You're fighting this guy, and first time you might die because you didn't realize he had this kind of build, and you're like, okay, now I realize I'm going to switch some skills here and go for it again, So...
Well, they also talked about, Velo, did you hear? So Ben was talking about in the video about disruption damage. Let's talk about that for a moment, because this is pretty interesting. As a melee character, I like to kill casters and I like to stop them. Most games you have a stun. I push number 4, it stuns you. It doesn't work like that.
Interrupt. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us how this works. What is disruption damage? What does it work like?
Well, that's I actually really kind of like, and I'm kind of confused by the concept. It basically, each ability you have will sort of almost have its own health pool against disruption damage, and so each attack will do both normal damage and may also do a certain amount of disruption damage. So a certain ability you make might do a ton of disruption damage, but not much actual damage.
Right.
So it uses to disrupt attacks. The whole concept does kind of confuse me, because I have a hard time picturing how this works, especially with the slowed down combat. Like, I picture someone doing an attack and you see him going for it, but then does your disruption attack have to be really fast to get it in there before he completes his attack? Or does it somehow, and will one be able to necessarily disrupt an attack? Or do you have to stack them and then you have to have multiple really fast disruption attacks? I don't know. I have a hard time picturing exactly how that's actually going to work in a combat when there's, you got the slow follow through swings and everything.
Yeah, maybe you can have, because this was something we did in Dark Age Camelot. You had like a train, right? You had a melee train. You had 4 or 5 people together. You'd have one person in there that was like the CC'er. I'll stun you, and then we got the other people who were, all these. So maybe you have a group of 3 or 4 people, and they come in, and 1 or 2, they're just doing constant disruption damage to lock that person down. It's kind of almost like a CC chain, right? I mean, you're just stun locking them with disruption damage. The other people are doing damage. Because I agree with you. If you're waiting to try to see what they're doing and then trying to counteract it. I mean, again, though, we can build our abilities. Maybe you can use a dagger and some sort of super fast ability that does a ton of disruption damage. You stick your dagger in the eye. There's just so many options. I think it's really interesting, though, because now, again, it's a choice you get to make, right? Do I want to do damage to you? Do I want to stop you from using that heal? Do I want to try to interrupt you? Because also, if you interrupt people, it can cause a negative effect, right? You can have this, fireball blow up in your face because you disrupted them, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts about it, actually, is that the effect of the disruption is not necessarily just canceling the effect. You know, it's going to vary based on what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you see the guy casting that big stuff, and you start hitting him with this disruption damage because you're like, oh my god, I want to make it blow up on his face, So that's the kind of reaction we're going to have. So maybe you don't want to have such a big cast, or maybe you don't want to cast something if there's a melee on you because he's going to disrupt it.
And maybe if he disrupts that huge spell, it might blow up, kill you, kill him, and kill everyone around you.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So.
What about, Alistair, talk about, because they also talk about body part targeting. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it seems like one of those things. I don't know how it's going to work, but it seems like it's just a way to word different modifiers. So basically, I hit you with something that snares you. Mm-hmm. So I hit you in the leg. But are they still gonna show the animation of you hitting on the leg? Because it's better to just say snare modifier instead of leg modifier. Because then it just creates a code for what everything does. So you want to make an ability that reduces the attack speed of the enemy. So basically, you just put the modifier attack the arm in the ability, because attacking the arm makes it reduce the attack speed of the enemy. If you want to do real damage, you want to do real critical damage, then you put the modifier attack the head. If you want to do bleeding damage, you put the modifier attack the torso. So I think that's just a way. It's a code for modifiers that will do different things. Then if it's just that, then it might as well not even have it. Because they just can put there snare, bleed. Crushing blow, whatever it is.
Kind of a waste of effort, right? You say hit their legs, but really you're just talking about snare them. Hit them in the head, really you're just talking about stunning them. What I wanted to bring up is back in Dark Age of Camelot, there was a class called Vampire, and they had an ability where you could target a body part and you could lower the armor. And then if your other abilities hit that body part, it did more damage and things like that. So what if it's not simply just a code word for snare or whatever, but what if you're actually trying to hit their legs, and maybe the animation does or doesn't do it, right? But it's like a check. It's a check, I'm going against your legs. But here's where I think it could be cool. What if the defender also gets to pick what body part they want to defend? So instead of just having a shield and trying to use the shield, I get to specifically say, defend my legs. So you try to hit my legs and snare me, I got to block, and I have an increase to blocking my legs, so now I blocked you. Right? But I tried to block my legs, and instead you tried to hit me in the head, and my shield is way down here, so you get a huge bonus to hitting me in the head, right? That sounds like it could be a really cool interactive system, because they were talking about how they're purposely making combat feel not sluggish, but it's a slower paced combat. It's not first person shooter, boom, boom, boom. And these are the kind of decisions I think we might be making, right? That sounds pretty cool to me.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds cool, yes, but we don't know if the system exactly works like that. But, I mean, there's potential. I just don't want to get the horses ahead or whatever the saying is, because it sounds like just code word, but we'll see. I mean,
he talks about
if it had the actual graphical, adjustment for the attack. You attack the leg, it actually attacks the leg. I don't know if it will.
I agree, it'd be cool, but
I think the system's still possibly really cool for healers, though, too, because they've got the whole thing where if you do leg damage, the healer can either heal the whole body or just heal the leg for, more heal in the leg. So I think that's going to be complicated, but possibly really rewarding for healers, since the combat's going to be slowed down. I think it might give us opportunity to really do things like that and still, because otherwise combat might be boring for the healers. If they're just sitting there, combat's kind of slower, and so they're just heal you, meh. Instead, they have to go, okay, heal the leg. This guy just got cracked in the face, so I'm going to heal his head. And that guy is just all messed up, so I'm just going to heal all of them.
Right, and I think that's what they're talking about, because they talk about it being more interactive, not just pushing buttons, but trying to decide what you're going to do. I think it involves that. However the system works out, I think there's a purpose. I hope it's just not some kind of lame code word for...
Yeah, me too. I mean, I hope you can actually put more armor on certain parts of your body, right? So if you know you're going to be on the front lines, you want to have a shield, and you want to have a bunch of armor on your leg, because your shield's going to be up all the time, protecting your torso and your head. And you put heavy armor on the leg, that reduces your movement speed, but it makes sure that other people don't reduce your movement speed, so everybody's moving like a tank wall, because that would be a very efficient strategy to stop a tank wall. You just start hitting people on the leg at random spots, and then they can't move fast enough, right? And leave everybody behind.
Right.
So
and they actually did mention that in the video, in the gargoyle example. They mentioned crafting an ability against a gargoyle who's made of stone, so they might not want to wear a helmet. Anyway, so then you make the downward swiping attack, and you say, I want to target the head, because you're assuming it might not be heavily armored. So, of course, they were talking about not wearing a helmet at all, but, there may be some level of that in there.
Well, maybe you could be a caster. You don't want to get stunned, so maybe you wear a plate helmet as a caster so you don't get stunned as easy, but maybe
like Magneto,
it restricts your vision, though, so maybe your spells can't go as far. So maybe you're like this battle mage, like mid-range. Tons of options. Hopefully we can find out. Let's watch the last part where they talk about this some more, disruption damage and abilities in the BSC video. Let's check this part out.
So interrupts is something we've obviously talked about at great length, and it's a very hot button topic on our forums. A lot of people have very strong opinions about them. The way that I've got them set up in the combat system at present, obviously not prototyped yet. We need to do some testing to make sure that this is going to work and exactly how it's going to work. But the concept of the way that interrupts work is a system of disruption damage. And that is to say that when you're going to use an ability, while that ability is in the process of activating, it's not just if you take damage, that ability stops and you can push it again and it starts again. It is that ability effectively has a health bar, which is a disruption bar. And that health bar is damaged not by normal damage, but by disruption damage. And attacks will not do one damage type or the other necessarily, but will be able to do a mix of both types of damage. So some attacks might be highly disruptive to abilities. Some attacks might not be disruptive to abilities at all. So this capacity means that you will be able to tune your abilities to be hard to disrupt or easy to disrupt at the cost of other things that you might want them to do, like it's harder to disrupt, but it does less damage. So there are some trade-offs, and that helps to make the system more interesting and help add choice. It also means that if your ability gets disrupted, we don't just have to make it only stop. Like an interrupt in most other games is it's interrupted, you might not be able to use it for a little while, but it just stops basically and nothing else happens to you. In this case, we're going to have a disruption effect that goes off when your ability is disrupted based on the components that you're using. So if you're using an especially powerful ability, like an especially powerful spell, that spell is going to go very wrong if it is disrupted. If that disruption health gets completely exhausted, that ability goes into a disrupted state, the spell goes off, it costs its resources, it does its effects, it's going to do a negative version of its effect to you and the people around you if you're the one who's casting that spell. So it's a lot more risky than just, oh, I didn't get my spell off.
All right, so we jumped ahead of ourselves a little bit talking about that. I got excited about it. But there they are again talking about all these ideas, things that we haven't seen. I don't think I've ever played with a disruption type system. Obviously interrupts, but so we've talked about, combat, building abilities, the ability building system, body part targeting. We've seen the alpha video. Let's go around. Velik and Alistair, what other kind of things do you guys think about that we haven't talked about? What else are you just itching to get off your chest here?
I mean, I don't know, man. There's so much uncertainty still,
Yeah.
There's so much stuff that needs to be decided. And then, as they give us one piece of information and that cascades into a bunch of what if, so I don't know, but right now I'm very excited about just creating these abilities, and what kinds of modifiers each class is going to have, because we're not just talking about casters having the abilities to create their own spells, we're talking about melees having the abilities to create their own attacks, right? So, I mean, what kinds of attacks will be more common for tanks? Because there will be some, but they will be based on what kind of tank you are. It could be a a caster tank. You know, you could be a melee heavy armor tank. You could be and each faction is going to have different classes. So maybe the Vikings should use this, or I mean, I'm excited to see what kind of gear, how the gear is going to interact with these abilities, on each faction, because we know that there's a chance that Vikings can use heavy armor and the Tuatha De Danann cannot. So how's that going to affect the balance?
Yeah, are they going to be slower, run slower, maybe? Yeah, I mean, tons of stuff.
Yeah, one of the things that really actually caught my interest was a very small mention in the video, really, in the BSC video, I think it was. But that really caught my interest was about faction balance, because of course that's always a huge topic. It's always a huge issue, and that's one reason I really like Tri-Realm games, because they tend to be better about faction balance. But you still usually have a single faction that's smaller than than the other two. They're a little bit more neglected. But one thing they mentioned in the video was that like the Vikings, Vikings are going to have like an axe build. So you may for like their warrior class. So like the Vikings might use axes more often. So not all the Vikings necessarily use axes, but you might notice most of the Viking warriors use axe attacks, or most of the Arthurian warriors might use sword attacks and things like that. So in that way, there'll be a certain type of typecast for certain factions. They may not all conform to it, but a good portion of them might. And you can build some of your abilities and defenses to kind of counteract that. So you can go, okay, Vikings are the most plentiful faction. These Vikings keep throwing freaking frost spells at us all day, driving me nuts. So I'm going to do whatever I can to defend our people against these frost spells and everything, and give us a buff against them. But then you've got the third faction, who is lowest in quantity. No one's going to worry about focusing their defenses and everything against them. So in a certain way, it's kind of passively
they have an advantage
to give them an advantage to help catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. What about, I was just thinking while you were talking about, I know you're big into RP. Is this something cool for RP too? Because now it's not just, here's your abilities, this is what you have to do. Like, you get to build your character how you want. Like, this is what I want my guy to focus on. This is his backstory. Like you're talking about, his family was killed by axe-wielding berserkers, so he's, right? Like, it gives you so many options. Like, this is how I want to build my character. Maybe more than any other.
Yeah, I really think it's cool, because one of the things that annoys me in games is when, let's take SWTOR, for instance. I go into this, I was RPing on forums for SWTOR for like a year and a half to 2 years before the game came out. And I had my Sith character, he was set up how I wanted to play him and everything. He uses a single-bladed lightsaber, so on and so forth. Then I get in game, and the way that I've role-played him the whole time, he really fits for the Sith Assassin, Darkness spec role. Because I always inevitably end up making tanks. But they have to use double-bladed lightsabers. It drove me freaking nuts. I was like, why can I not use a single-bladed lightsaber as a tanky? I'd have to go Juggernaut. That annoys me. I don't want to make a Juggernaut. But in this game, I won't have that problem. I can make whatever I want to, and within limits. And then when I get in game, I can go, okay, I can do this. I can specialize within here. If I want to use a sword, that's not going to stop me necessarily from being like a spellcaster. I can still have a sword and whip it out if I want to, because I can equip whatever I want.
Yeah.
And I think the more freedom you have in the game, the best it is for roleplay, right? Because then you can just create your character concept with your imagination, which is completely, unrestrained. It's imagination. And then when you go into the game where you have the restraints are minimal, so then you can actually reproduce in the game mechanics what you thought about your character. And one thing that I also think that is important to roleplay is having those differences, right? Because then you really feel like you're fighting somebody who's different from you. You're protecting your home from outsiders, from invaders who have a different way of they look different. They have a different way of fighting. They have different strategies. They have different spells. They use different abilities. They use different weapons than you do. So they're completely like they are these other people that So it helps build that faction hate. That rivalry that is so cool about these PvP games with factions. Where you go in there and you're like, oh, look at those peasants. They're breaking our walls. And then they're gonna build those rude walls of bunch of Viking.
Right.
Animal skins on it. I don't want to see it. I just want to destroy it. So that kind of role play feeling also helps a lot. Makes more fun.
And on an individual basis, people people can create their own like iconic abilities. It's like, this is my ability that I use. Very few other people use this ability, and that's just what I want to do. Someone's like, I want to make a crazed berserker mage who has an AoE fire spell that's really freaking powerful, and he just, like wears a bunch of armor, runs straight into the enemies, and blows himself up as kamikaze style. It's probably not going to be very effective, but if somebody wanted to do something like that, they would be known for it. Their character's the crazy guy that runs in and blows up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, maybe the most exciting thing about all this is that the options, right? Like, I remember in Guild Wars 2, you pick, let's say you're a guardian, and you pick a two-handed sword. You are stuck with those 5 sword abilities, and that's it. If you don't like one of, let's say whatever reason, you want to use a two-handed sword for RP, maybe you like one of the abilities, whatever it is, you're stuck with these other abilities that maybe you don't like and they suck. This total freedom, right? Total freedom, it's absolutely awesome. Lots of awesome stuff in the video. This is officially the first look that a lot of people got to see, that we get to see of the game, and we're still over a year and a half away from launch, and we actually have a game that we get to see, that people are playing. So that's obviously really, really exciting. Before we close up here, guys, any final thoughts, comments?
I'll go ahead and answer Torrid's question. He just asked us how excited we are for the game and what our final thoughts are on it. I'm cautiously excited. I'm a little bit more cautious than perhaps some people because I've been burned on so many MMOs in the past. I think the game has a hell of a lot of potential, and if they follow through with it, it'll be great. Going into just looking at the systems we're looking at today, I think that the level of potential that the combat systems have is amazing. There are a lot of problems with it, a lot of potential issues with balancing. I mean, I'm a firm believer in chaotic balance. Having things balanced in their imbalance. Perfect imperfection, but at the same point, you do have to have a certain level of balance in there to the whole thing for that to still work. So, we'll see how their implementation fits the ideals.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm just excited about all we talked about today makes me very excited about the RVR. That's what I care about. I don't care about anything else. I can say, crafting is important. Yes, I know. Rationally speaking, I know crafting is important. In practice, I don't give a damn. I just want fun fights, and I know myself enough to know that. So this is what I want to see working: the fights, the strategies you can make, taking keeps, taking the walls. How often are these fights going to happen? How often are we going to be able to attack that big keep with a huge defense and siege it for hours, maybe? This kind of how the flow of the game goes in terms of PvP. That's what I'm excited about. Everything that I've seen so far seems really promising, really exciting. The game seems to have mechanics that all converge to support that, which is something that I have never seen in the MMO industry so far. And the fact that this game is only RVR helps a lot. So, I mean, I'm very excited about all of that and how I'm going to be able to play my character in this. Am I going to be known for being that guy who always does this? Can I have a skill that is like my signature move, like Velik said? Is the kind of stuff going to be actually viable? Because it's easy to promise that. It's easy to say, our system is going to allow it, but then in reality, it really doesn't, right? So I just want to see how it goes, actually.
Yeah, and I guess we'll close up with that. I'll just say that I'm excited for being able to make a character I want, right? Like, so many times you get a new game, you're trying to make a character like your favorite character from another game, right? Like, I love the Reaver from Dark Age Camelot. I'm trying to make this character, it's like life-stealing and shields and all this stuff, and it always kind of lets you down. And here, I feel like you can make the character you want. I'm also excited for the huge battles. Like, sometimes I like to just stand far away, like on a mountain somewhere, and just watch this crazy battle happen. And from what we've seen so far, we'll hopefully have maybe the biggest battles we've seen in an MMO, which is super exciting.
Exactly.
That's going to be the most fun. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. We'll be back next week. Of course, as always, Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to be talking about the cube system, buildings, everything that you've seen in the video so far. All the buildings, you can build that stuff with cube. And we're going to talk about it, talk about the screenshots, and a bunch of other awesome stuff, including a fan site that's going to hopefully be available for us starting next week as well. Everybody, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.